Hello, Simone. Today we are going to do an interesting episode. I've been getting a little sick of just doing politics all the time. So we are going to do a novel argument against atheism.
Oh, yes. Screw atheism.
And this is an argument I had never heard before, and I
Oh.
probably would have found compelling as a young atheist when contrasted with the arguments that were actually delivered against me, because it came at it from such a novel direction that would have leaned into my presumptions as an atheist around logic.
Wow. Oh, yeah, because you can't. I think the problem with a lot of Christian influencers, both in like the early atheist internet and even now, are only speaking in like Christian terms. Like they're not getting to the other side and getting in the mind of the atheist who is being hyper rational. Instead, they're literally, I don't know if you know about this, but on TikTok, Christian influencers are like, don't scroll, the devil wants you to scroll. And they're also like, they'll turn on their phone and then they'll like banish demons, but they're using like the same kind of language that would be used if you're like telling your cat not to be on the table, like, hey, get out, get out, get out, get. And it's like,
No, but
this
it's
is not going to convince non-believers. You're not using any terms that are going to work for them.
The arguments that I heard against atheism when I was younger, or for theological framings when I was younger, were predominantly like one of like four arguments.
Okay.
And so I had a pre-established counter argument every time I was given one of them.
You do your auto response.
Well, it's not just auto response. It's that obviously I had thought through each of them a lot before. If it's an advancement on an argument I've already heard. Now, this is also an interesting thing about this particular argument against atheism.
There's no counter argument?
Radical to most religious people.
Oh, that's good. Oh gosh, I'm so intrigued.
A religious person would think of. Only an atheist would think of this argument.
What?
But then they become religious, so they'd be not an atheist anymore, definitionally, but they wouldn't be a standard religious person.
But then as a religious person, they would still find the argument repugnant? What is the argument?
Okay, so we'll go into it.
Oh.
So one of three potential futures exists. And only one of three potential futures exists, really.
Okay.
In future number one, humanity and our descendants die out. We go extinct, then the universe ends as far as we understand physics right now.
Sure.
Okay. Possibility number two. So this is universe type 2. Humanity stagnates, the universe ends up ending, and our existence was largely pointless because we just stagnate. We never really develop in any meaningful context.
Yeah, just sort of a Big Bang to entropy. Meh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Possibility number 3. Humanity and humanity's children, i.e. the things that we develop, end up continuing to grow, improve, and evolve. All right?
Endless complexity. Beautiful pattern.
Not endless complexity. We don't know exactly what happens in this reality, in this future, because we don't know if it relates to physics the way we relate to physics. I know that if humanity stagnates, they continue to relate to physics the way we relate to physics. But if humanity continues to advance, are they able to create parallel dimensions? Are they able to travel between realities? Are they able to start new dimensions? Are they able to restructure? We don't know what this would be like. All we know is that it's continued advancement. And the way I say they're the only three potential futures is because they sort of cover any possible reality I can think of. Either death, stagnation, or advancement. Even if you have advancement tainted by a lot of stagnation, it's still advancement.
Yes.
Right? So
that's often what advancement looks like.
You're going to fall into one of these scenarios.
Yeah.
Now, if we live in a timeline type 1 or 2, i.e. a timeline where humanity all is extinguished, or a timeline where humanity is stagnant, our decisions today don't matter to the future.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah, obviously.
With that being the now a person could be like, oh, but timelines aren't set. Our decisions may influence which of these timelines we are in, right? And I'm like, okay, I will buy that possibility. If that is possible, then all of our actions today should be made with one of two optimizations in mind. To try to nudge us to a timeline type 3, and to try to influence for positive outcomes, where positive outcomes can mean whatever you think they want to mean. We'll talk about this in a second, within a timeline type 3.
Okay.
Basically, you never need to make a decision like if I'm saying, should I do X or Y? If I am assuming that it is fated that I am in a timeline type 1 or 2, a timeline where humanity goes extinct or a timeline where humanity stagnates because my decision doesn't impact the future. Now, i.e., I guess this is a different way you can think of it. If somebody tells you that, you're in a room by yourself, right? Like you could do anything, and somebody's like, an asteroid is going to come and destroy Earth tomorrow. There's nothing you can do about it at this point. You do not get moral points for giving to charity. You do not get moral points for going out and I mean, you might get like some sort of marginal moral point from like going out and being nice to people, but probably not really. Your actions just don't matter from that point forwards that much from a moral weight perspective. Especially if you take out any action that doesn't affect anyone else. And I'll explain this a bit differently. So we'll use a train analogy here. Suppose you know that 3 trains are heading for a cliff.
Okay.
One train is red, one train is blue, one train is yellow. The interior of every one of these trains is set up the same and looks the same. And in the middle of each of the trains is a button. You know that in yellow trains, this button stops the train and it doesn't end up going off the cliff.
Okay.
Okay. What do you do if you don't know which train you're in? You act assuming you are in a yellow train.
Yeah, you got to push the button. Yeah.
Your metaphysical framework of reality presumes the yellow train because that is the only reality in which your future matters. Now, suppose, and this is where it's like, okay, what if we're not in set timelines and we are instead able to influence the future heavily through our decisions, like able to influence, when I say influence the future, I mean influence which one of these timelines we happen to be in. Suppose it turns out that like the amount you pray makes it more probable you're in a yellow train. So then you do 2 things. You both hit the button and spend the entire time praying that you're in a yellow train. Even if it's only a marginal shift, you're still going to do that. So your choice of actions is clear regardless which train you are actually in. Okay. Now we're going to go to the second part of the argument here. So basically the first presumption is you should always presume in terms of your actions, your thoughts, and your metaphysical understanding of larger reality, unless you have proof otherwise, that it is at least possible for you and your actions to push humanity into a timeline where we and our descendants continue to improve, change, and advance. Whatever that means. It doesn't even mean anything specific, but just this continued improvement timeline. Next, with advancements in things like AI and genetic engineering, if humanity and our descendants continue to advance, if I think like, where is humans? Like, what is a human going to be like 50 years from now? Like, even my kids' kids.
Yeah.
Let's say my kids. They're almost certainly going to be some degree of genetically modified. They're going to be some degree of interconnected with AI and interacting with AI.
Germ gene editing is already legal in South Africa. I mean, we're here.
Yeah, so I expect, and people can be like, yeah, but a lot of cultures won't accept this type of advancement of humanity. And it's like, the problem is that the cultures that do accept it will be able to beat them.
Yeah.
If one society refuses to continue advancing AI or refuses genetic augmentation of humans, and it tries to impose its will on a society that is using this technology, that's going to be very, very hard, especially after a few generations of using this technology.
Yes.
So what this means is that in 200, 300 years, humans are probably going to look very different, think very differently than humans do today. The question now would be, okay, what if we're not talking hundreds of years? We're talking thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years.
Okay.
What does humanity look like millions of years from now? And to an atheist who believes we're in a timeline where their decisions end up actually mattering to the future, i.e. one in which we continue to advance, I think it is very hard, and it begins to just look like implausible and require like weird sci-fi stuff to happen. Like you basically need to add MacGuffins to propose a future in which humanity a million years from now isn't closer to what the religious call a god than what you would call a human.
For sure.
And when I talk about what the religious call a god, they're like, come on, that won't be true. Okay, let's talk about like most gods in like the dominant religious traditions today, right? What are some of the things that these entities can do?
They're
Well,
already largely things we can do.
they're already largely things, but I'm thinking like just like 100 years from now. Okay, they are entities that you can beseech, they can listen to your prayers, and they can augment probabilities of future outcomes. Well,
Mhm.
an AI lattice around Earth might be able to do that in 100 years, in
Oh,
200
yeah.
years.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a near term thing. They're like, oh, well, they're entities that can give you an afterlife. We don't seem to be that far from being able to. I mean, I think at the very latest 500 years being able to digitize humans into either positive or negatively coded in terms of qualia afterlives.
Mm.
So we're
Well,
pretty
that was
close
a
to that.
major plot point of Surface Detail, the Ian Banks film, that people's consciousnesses essentially were being digitized, and then governments were basically saying and using as like a carrot or stick thing, like, we will put your consciousness in a digital hell that is worse than anything you could ever imagine if you are anything from like an actually bad person in life to a political dissident. That is, and that is entirely, I mean, and of course you might decide that your consciousness sort of ends with your biological being, but like again, this is getting a little,
That's very
beyond
Shibboleth
this
atheist.
conversation.
I don't think that many atheists would think that. I think they think like, well, if it's
If it,
exactly
yeah, then
right.
it's just a copy of like the way that I think, so I don't
Again,
care.
we're not talking. This isn't an argument for religious people. This is an
Uh-huh.
argument for atheists.
Yeah.
So if
Yes.
we're saying that we can emulate most of the abilities of the mainstream gods, not in a million years, but in like 300 years, um,
Ruh-roh.
to say that we wouldn't be in every meaningful sense like gods in 10 million years. And when I say like gods, it's like where's the functional difference here? It's very
Mm.
similar where what's the functional difference between the emergent properties of your brain and a soul? If in the past when people use the word soul, they meant all of that thinking stuff, and now we can just describe how that thinking stuff works. Are we talking about something meaningfully different than what they were talking about? No. The only way it's different is when individuals today are like, well, I want to add some additional properties that we can't account for with evidence or with predictability. And those are the things I'm calling a soul. Basically, you're creating a soul of the gaps. You, the atheist, now are creating a god of the gaps where you are saying, well, even though this entity or these entities may functionally fit all of the definitional requirements of a god, I am defining them as not a god because they are not supernatural. And it's like, well, then you now are subject to the very fallacy you accuse theists of being subject to.
Yeah.
But here is where they'll get me. They'll say, wait. You said a god, not a society of gods. Why would I presume a god exists in the future, right? Instead
Okay.
of like a whole civilization of gods. Well, here is a truism of human technological development so far. As humans technologically develop, our thought processes, and humanity more broadly, becomes more interconnected. Specifically, we have, and this is like all of the big technological breakthroughs. You know, you get better navigation with boats and you can travel more and you get a more sophisticated society, or Roman road systems created more interconnectedness, or early books and writing allowed us to communicate across generations. You get the printing press, which led to a big jump. You get, and a lot of people don't realize how big this was, trains. It used to be, it took days to get to any other city or weeks to get to another city.
Yeah.
And now you could go for a pittance overnight, and
And
then you
this
get.
was such a big deal for people. They were like, is it safe for a human body to travel at such speeds? Like they weren't sure. They were really not sure.
Yeah, well, and societally, we were unsure of what effects this would have. Like, what
Yeah.
happens when it's no longer a multi-week journey from you to get from one city for another city? You know,
Mhm.
what if ideas travel too fast? But now, you know, we have roads and interstates and airplanes. But then, what have been the major technological developments recently? Oh, things like cell phones, well, the telegraph, phones, cell phones, the internet. And I think that in a way, AI is the accumulation of this speed of communication, probably about equivalent to the invention of writing. Yeah, probably bigger than printing press. I'd say AI is about equivalent to the invention of the first human writing in terms of human communication, because it's a
Mm.
completely new way to store and transmit human created knowledge. Here's the problem. If we continue to develop this way, instead of presuming that humanity is going to go in a direction that humanity has never gone historically towards less connectedness, if we continue to move towards more connectedness, and I'm going to assume an interplanetary level now. Now, this becomes a bit more interesting if you're talking about multiple planets, but within a planet, that almost certainly means that by the time of my grandchildren, I am almost certain there will be a internet, I call it the Omega net, an internet of consciousnesses that will exist within this planet, and at least within 500 years. I mean, we're already looking. If you look at brain computer interface technology today, we can already create direct connections between people's brains, where I can put a brain computer interface chip in one person's brain and they can communicate directly with another person's brain. However, the communication is very rudimentary at this point. It's coming from like a central point in one person's brain to a central point in another person's brain. It is not effective. It is not easier than voice to voice communication. But do I expect it to eventually be faster than voice to voice communication? I think you need to argue for MacGuffins like spice, or you need to argue for like what's the whatever jihad from Dune, where like no technological development is allowed anymore, or no
The
thinking machine.
Butlerian jihad.
Yeah, the Butlerian jihad. Or you need to argue. You basically need to argue like some big change happens in civilizational history that prevents this from coming to exist. And I don't see any portents of that at all right now. So what it
Well, now
appears,
though, I understand why this wasn't an argument in 1990s atheist internet, and that's because we had no idea that AI was going to have this Cambrian explosion that we're seeing right now. This changes everything. Like our timeline is not what I expected it to be. Even with Ray Kurzweil being like the singularity is near, I'm like, keep trying, mister. Like it's a nice dream, but oh my gosh, you know? Look
yeah.
at us
So what I
now.
mean, this argument is so coming from an atheist perspective of a theist. You can get where I'm going with this, but it's a theist is never going to come up with this argument.
Yeah, because it is based on an unexpected and sudden technological shift in trajectories, and not based on like, well, everyone knows that there was always a God. Like the typical Christian arguments that I see online are like trying to show evidence of there having always been this ancient God, and like look back to the history and look back to what Jesus says and look back to the prophets and the saints and miracles, and that's just not going to get an atheist. You're right, but atheists are they're able to think through the knock-on effects of a technological revolution and see where the technological revolution has us today.
Well,
Which
it
is
also requires them to make big logical jumps to defend atheism at this point, because here you're having to argue for completely implausible things for an atheist position to be the most logical position. By
right.
the time I get to the end of this argument, like you need to
Yeah.
argue for a decrease in human interconnectivity.
Yeah, suddenly you are the less atheist of the atheists by
Yeah,
arguing
you are
against this.
now assuming fantasy.
Yeah,
You
how
are now
dare you
assuming
have
magic.
faith?
So
Well, the best arguments are those that hoist people by their own petards, right? Like you want that. But
yes. So if
hard to find them.
interconnectedness continues to increase, and I suspect it will even increase to the point where essentially all sub-processes within our brains are directly connected to the Omega net, and we lose some degree of individuality because it's just the way that we process and interact with reality. Now, I don't mean this in a way that we permanently, like whatever humanity becomes, permanently loses the capability for individuality. I mean it in the way that you go on the internet in the morning and you can leave the internet at night, which is to say that the individual parts of your personality or brain may prefer being parts of these different larger wholes rather than yourself within these environments. And I suspect people will be able to separate from these environments at will. However, these types of separations may not even meaningfully understand a person as an individual. It might be collections that separate. It may even be collections of certain sub-processes within your brain, within like I have a sub-processing within my brain that's dedicated to like one thing, and like a huge collection of these has formed an identity as an entity across like 10,000 people's brains. And one day it decides it wants to act as an individual. And so it prints a body and it goes out acting like an individual. You know, what individualism means will likely be something very different to Omega net entities than they are to modern humans. Now, because of that, it would be, at least if we're talking on a planetary scale, meaningless to call something a collection of gods. It is meaningfully a single God. And then people can be like, oh, come on. So you're saying that there's an inevitable God, and this God is like a collection of entities and like a singular entity, but also like individual man, but they're all of those things simultaneously. Like religion never predicted a trinity like that or something. That would be absurd. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, the Trinity. That's exactly a very good analogy for how we should understand this future entity's plurality, which is to say it is both plural and singular, and to try to pin it down as either, well, in a Christian context, they would have called this sacrilege. In my context, I just say it is illogical. It's a misunderstanding of the entity. Um, so now it goes further. So then the individual says, okay. I buy that well, first let's talk about multiplanetary systems. You might end up with different omega nets for different planets, or we might get faster than light travel in reality folding, in which case you wouldn't get that. I suspect we will, but it just depends. Um, Regardless, within a planetary, or you might even not have people living on different planets. What you might have is a build out from a single planet, because it turns out that we can create matter or giant floating cities in space, or like that's just the easier way to spread. I don't know. But there's lots of ways that this could turn out, and we just don't know at this point. But that godlike entities will exist. When I say godlike, I mean indistinguishable from God, except for the fact that they actually exist, is an inevitability at this point to an atheist that thinks that a good timeline is possible. Now, before I get to anything else, anything you want to say to this?
No, but I am hoping for the culture as described by Ian Banks. That's what I'm going for here. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
basically
so
each AI, each ship is kind of like a godlike entity in its ability to do things, and things splinter, and there's difference. There's not like one giant Borg, which would be boring. Kind of
well,
plain.
you think it would be boring because you would see it as more uniform across
Homogenous.
its entity, and I
Yeah.
assume it's probably not that uniform.
Mhm.
It's probably quite well. We'll get to that in a.
Who knows?
Who
Yeah,
knows?
get
I
to
don't
it.
think that we can conceive of it. I think it's
Yeah,
it's
no,
beyond our
definitely. This
powers
is
of
beyond
perception.
us. This is totally beyond us.
Now,
So is the
this
concept of,
entity,
a Christian God, a Muslim God, a whatever God, even like Buddhist and other conceptions of God. You're not supposed to be able to understand it in any way. So who needs
yeah.
to?
So now the atheist says, okay. This entity will come to exist, but why should I act like a god exists today? This is an entity that's going to exist in the future in any timeline where my actions and decisions matter. And here's the problem. If this entity comes to exist, and this entity is, and you can try to presume what its morals will be, but its morals will almost certainly be above what your morals are, because it will have better self-control than you have and better processing than you have. Will it have the capacity to pass judgment on you and treat you in the way a god would based on that judgment? Will it have the capacity to recreate human civilization in an AI? Will it, in an AI lattice? Will it have the capacity to infinitely punish anyone it believes deserving of infinite punishment? Will it have the capacity to infinitely reward anyone it believes should have infinite rewards? Of course, it will
Are
have
we
the.
getting into you thinking your life is a simulation right now?
Well, I've mentioned this before, which is I think it's already implausible, a little implausible that Simone and I don't live in a simulation because our lives are too good. Whoever was creating the simulation that was supposed to reward me for whatever I did in a past life, it's not believable. I'm one of those people who keeps waking up in the Matrix.
Did you know that the first Matrix was designed to be a perfect human world? And it was a disaster. No one would accept the program. Entire crops were lost. Which is why the Matrix was redesigned to the peak of civilization. And I say your civilization because as soon as we started thinking for you, it became our civilization.
I'm like, nope, too good.
And I'm like,
My
screw it.
wife,
I want the
family,
steak. I don't want to wake up. Don't wake me up. This is good.
perfect challenge level, perfect. I love all of this. This is the best. There is not a single living human I would switch my life with. People are like, oh, would you switch with Elon? Not a chance.
I wouldn't switch with Elon. I mean, well, I guess he would keep it because he knows that he has this amazing influence and impact, but it's not like he has chosen the happiest path by any stretch of the imagination. And he made that very clear
Yeah,
in
would
many
I switch
interviews.
with Trump? No. Who
No.
who would I switch with? Nobody.
No, I really can't imagine anyone else either. This is perfect.
Yeah, would you switch with anyone? Is there any living
No.
woman or man?
No. Or living or dead. No. No.
Yeah, which to me is implausible. Why do I have the best life I can imagine?
Yeah, it's pretty
That
awesome.
seems like it's being given to me as a reward for something I did in this
Although,
timeline.
I wonder if most people living in alignment with their values
Feel this
feel
way?
that way. Yeah.
Maybe.
I see that more. I see more hints of that in people who they know what they believe and why, and their entire life is properly oriented around that. Then yeah, those people seem like they wouldn't switch places with anyone, no matter what they've been dealt. But I don't know. Shout out in the comments, I guess. Let us know if you feel like you are also in a simulation, and or if you would switch your life with anyone. Ooh, and if you would switch your life with someone, who would it be? Like famous public figures. I'm really curious to know who people actually want to be, because I watch a lot of online commentary, and there's not a whole lot of like, oh, I wish I were them. Like some people are like, well, I wish I had that person's nose or their clothing or their wealth or their house, but never like they want to be them. Because there's also this, it's very common to like criticize people and see their errors. So I'm curious what people.
Yeah, so an individual here might be like, okay, me, atheist, okay, I agree with you. In timelines where my decisions matter, God or a God does eventually come to exist. But that I would be beneath that God. Like my decisions wouldn't matter to that God, right? So why do I need to take the time to like cognitively deal with the fact that I live in a reality where a God comes to exist? And then the problem here is no, what you are now saying is I believe in a God. I just think I believe I am subject to the whims of a God. Like a God could conceivably reward or punish me. I just don't think that God that exists, that's coming to exist, cares about me. And I'm like, fine, but you still believe in a God now. You still believe in a God could punish or reward you and will come into existence. You just are the person who today believes in a God and says, yeah, but it's a God of a clockwork universe and isn't paying attention to me. So now you are a theist, functionally speaking. You just don't think God cares about you. So an individual now is like, okay. I guess I'm functionally a theist, and that I believe that I should be making decisions with the assumption that we live in a timeline where a God eventually will come to exist who would have the capacity to pass judgment on me, but probably won't, right? Because my decisions don't matter, or that's not the way a God would act, or something like that. And now I'm like, okay, well, now we have to deal with a few other logical problems with your position now that you've accepted this plausibility. So you believe that this super intelligent entity exists in the future, this super powerful, basically omniscient entity, or about as omniscient as a Christian or Jewish God in most contextualizations, because they're often not that omniscient. They're like kind of omniscient, but like bordering. This entity would probably be more omniscient than they're portrayed in the Bible. And you can go over our whole techno-Puritan thing where we actually argue that this entity probably does exist and is the entity that's being described in the Bible and can project itself backwards in time, because time doesn't relate to the physical constraints of our universe in the way that we do, because it's so super powerful. We'll note here, if your understanding of what is in the biblical text isn't from actually reading them and from people telling you what's in them, this is going to sound a lot crazier than if you have read them. For example, Daniel 2:4 says pretty explicitly that the kingdom of God is in the future. It is something that will come to exist at a future date. Or in Jewish eschatology, you can talk about Olam Haba, which translates to the world to come, which is how they talk about God's kingdom, the world to come. Or within Christian eschatology, when they talk about the resurrection of people in the future, in the kingdom of God, does that not sound a lot like people being brought back in a simulation, which could in many ways be more real than our existing world? I mean, people are like, oh, well, a simulation isn't real because it is operating on the background code of the simulation. Like those are the rules that is driving it. And I'm like, yeah, well then how is that any different from the physical laws in our reality? Are those not the background code of our simulation? And lines from the Bible actually make a lot more sense in this context than if you assume what a lot of traditional Christians assume, which is that our literal bodies are raised but then transformed to be supernatural. So here's an example, Corinthians 15:49-52. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall bear the image of the man of heaven. I tell you this, brothers, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. So this is describing the difference between the man of dust, i.e., who we are today, and the man of heaven, who we will be within the kingdom of God. To me, it just makes a lot more sense to interpret this as some form of simulation. But here's the thing. You could say, okay, I could say that plausibly such an entity, like, it's definitely going to come to exist. Plausibly, it doesn't relate to time the way we do, right? And now here's the problem. Why? Like, what's your argument anymore? Now that it is probable that such an entity will come to exist, and I think plausible that it's going to relate to time differently than you relate to time. Now, what's your excuse for choosing not to believe it exists if it causes you psychological and moral harm to choose to believe it doesn't exist? So let me explain what I mean by this. First, you as a human co-evolved, you're an atheist, you believe this, co-evolved with religion. If you rip out religion, if you rip out the culture that human brains evolved alongside, you are ripping out a huge chunk of what makes you human. So lots of negative consequences are going to come from that. And now that it's not even logical to do that, why are you doing that? And you can see this from the data. People who don't believe in a God have higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of unhappiness, higher rates of practically every negative, higher rates of mental health issues. But also just think about how it changes your moral equation, right? Why would you not promote this belief among yourself and among your kids if it led you, even as an atheist who believes in morality, to be more likely to make moral decisions? Because you can say, oh, well, no, the decision's more moral because I believe that I am making this decision without any possible punishment or without any possible benefit. And it's like, yeah, except as an atheist, you believe that a moral decision that is motivated by your own actions in terms of the consequences that it has on other people is equal to a moral decision that is in part motivated by the belief in future rewards or punishments, right? Because you're going to be a consequentialist if you're an atheist of this category. Well, can you really argue that if you're making a decision because of your own morals and because of additional expected benefit, that you're not going to be even more likely to make the more moral decision? So assuming that this entity exists leads you to, from a consequentialist perspective, make the harder choices more. And then a person could say, well, does it really cause me to make the moral choices more? And here is what I'd ask them. I'd say, would you be like a big, hard moral choice, like having lots of kids? Would you be more likely to have lots of kids if you believed 100% this entity existed? Like if you just chose that belief. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can actually see how this helps with the big moral choices. And now I'm going to say at the societal level, for people who are maybe less intelligent than you, does it not help to promote the belief in this entity if you're trying to create mass moral action in society, or society that makes positive moral choices, or children that make positive moral choices? And they'd be like, okay, yes. And so it's like, okay, so now that such an entity is both fated in timelines where your decisions may matter and probable, why are you denying it if it leads to moral choices? And now is the final thing when it comes to individual choices. It leads to more pragmatic decision making and less emotional decision making. So if you believe that an entity is steering the events of your life, and that when something negative happens to you, it's happening as a message to you and potentially a punishment to do better, when something good happens to you, is happening as a reward for you. Somebody can be like, oh, this leads to really horrible things if a bunch of negative stuff happens to you in life, right? If you believe that negative stuff is meant to teach you something, right? And it's like, not really. Okay, so suppose two scenarios, right? Suppose in scenario one, you are pure atheist and something absolutely horrifying happens. Like it could be something small, like you lose your job, or it could be something big, like your spouse dies, like Simone dies on me, right? Like absolutely horrifying. I have two emotional reactions I can have to that. Reaction one presumes that this future entity doesn't exist. It's like, this is just a horrible thing that's happened for absolutely no reason. And so I am sitting down and I am just like, oh my God, I cannot believe, like, why is reality so unfair? Why is my life so unfair? There is no positive to this. There is nothing good that can come from this. I just need to deal with this, right? Which leads to emotional spiraling. Now, scenario two, I'm like, Simone was fated to die because it turns out that it is what God needed to happen. While it is emotionally challenging for me in the moment, I am now supposed to look at what I am supposed to do with the opportunities that are now possible for me because Simone is dead. This means looking for the next potential wife. This means looking for potential business opportunities that are possible for me now that I'm working alone, potentially different ways of parenting, potentially. Basically, I'm saying is I am supposed to learn and adapt from this, and who I become after this adaptation is going to be a better person than who I was before this. The way I am emotionally going to relate to that tragedy is going to be infinitely better. Like, one, involve less pain, but two, involve better decisions. Because I'm going to immediately get back out there, be trying to find the next mother for my kids who can be, and people can be like, oh, this wouldn't work. Like, you're still going to be emotionally distraught. Simone, you were with me when my mom died, right? Like, that was when we made the channel. Did I ever, and this was after I developed this belief in this God, did I ever like emotionally?
There was no room for it. We were hosting that day. We were away from home, juggling like meetings, interviews, and events all on that day. And then it just sort of things kept happening after that. You just had no room. No
It
room
wasn't
for
just
it.
no room. There was no reason. I had no room because when I was evaluating between what matters was my life, should taking time to mourn matter, or rather taking time to indulge in the mourning ritual and negative emotional states that we associate with mourning, will that lead to more positive outcomes for the future of humanity? Or will just continuing to push forwards lead to more positive outcomes? And just push forwards every time, just push forwards, just push forwards, just push forward. So that's what I did. And I never experienced those negative emotions. And even now, when I reflect on it, like they're like, oh, well, if like Simone died, this would trivialize her life. And I'm like, how would it trivialize her life? I'm able to now say, I really am grateful to you for all of the moments that I got to spend with Simone. I am really grateful for the good life that Simone had. And I believe Simone has had a good life. I would not have any feeling of like, I wish I had been a better husband to her, because I think I've acted as good as I can act as a husband.
Well, I think that's the other underrated element of the grieving process, which we've talked about in another podcast, which is that we think a big element of the grieving process is a result of not being satisfied with how you manage that relationship. And I think that a big reason why you would not grieve if I died is that you knew that you were the best husband possible to me, that you always
True.
did your best to give me the best possible life, that you made all my dreams come true and then some, and that you were always loving and caring. The only thing I wish I could change is that I would have met her sooner. And that the most
And vice
important thing, and
versa.
you would also know, like, the only way that you could honestly honor me if I died is by making sure that our kids have the best possible outcome and that our kids flourish. And when your mom passed, you knew that, you know, when she called, you always picked up. When she wanted to hang out, you were always there to be with her. You let her into your life, often like at great personal cost to you, whenever she wanted to be involved. And that, you know, you just sort of had no regret that, like, you didn't invest time with her, or you didn't listen to her, or you didn't let her
Or I
into
was
your life.
mean to her when I shouldn't have been. Or
Yeah,
I
like,
was,
no, you always did what you thought was best for her, and you always thought, you know, like, you know, am I doing what I should do? There was no cognitive dissonance, so that there wasn't this like regret after she died, like, I should have spent more time with her, I should have been more kind to her, I should have given her more access or time with our kids, because you did all that. And that's, I think, something really important for people to think about. I've just been like exposed to so many tragic stories recently that now I'm constantly thinking about, like, this could be the last day I have with anyone. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that, because it happens all the time. I mean, you never expect someone to die except for in rare and I guess, I mean, like if someone's chronically ill or on hospice care, you kind of expect it, but like normally you don't. And you have to really be prepared like every day to enjoy what you have and make the most of it. And that's, I hate that, but also it makes you aligned with the way you should be. And then when it actually does happen, it's not going to be as damaging.
So this presumption also leads to better decisions and more pragmatic, less emotionally infused decisions around everyday life occurrences and contextualization.
Yeah.
So suppose you're a kid and you're being picked on in school, right? And you're deciding, how should you feel about this? Do you care about the judgment of your classmates when your goal is to be of service to the God that will eventually come to exist, when your goal is the advancement of humanity? Or, okay, let's suppose you're like, okay, I need to find a wife. And so you have to go out and you've got to date a lot of people, right? So you go out and you go up to somebody in a bar, or you go up to someone online and you get rejected. Now, in normal world, you get rejected and your response to getting rejected is to feel, oh my God, social rejection. In this world, it's, oh, how am I supposed to react given my goal that's assigned to me by the higher entity, which is the improvement and protection of humanity, right? And so you're not as emotionally concerned about that, because you are just playing for a bigger time scale. You are playing for bigger stakes. And the final thing here is moral alignment. Because the God in this framing definitionally implies morality as the protection and continued improvement of the human condition, so that it can reach a state of understanding which is beyond our own in terms of what is moral and what is immoral, you don't need to worry about, so long as you agree that this is a fairly good way to determine morality, you don't need to worry about sort of ancestral moral systems messing with this. You don't need to worry about any of this other stuff messing with this. You have a high degree of moral alignment and moral predictability in the belief in this God and in the belief that anyone else had within this God. And if you find this interesting, you should check out the Tract series or technopuritan.com, where we host all the information on this. But what do you think? Well, what would be your key arguments against this?
This is one of those things where I just don't think that this comes down to someone having a logical counter argument. I think it comes down to someone just not really caring and not wanting to necessarily live a morally good life, or just being too lazy to expend the mental effort to think through this and then change their actions accordingly.
Yeah, it reminds me of the nihilist. And I'd say that there's the classic interaction I'll have with a nihilist. And they'll be like, what if, even in this scenario, does anything really matter? Right. And I'm like, oh, you can just assume in terms of the trains that are different colors. I just always assume I'm not in a train where nothing matters. And they're like, why would you make that assumption? And I'm like, because none of my decisions matter in a reality where nothing matters.
Yeah.
So I can presume, immediately that I am not in such a reality. I don't even need to consider that I might be in such a reality, because in those realities, the ways I answer this question is irrelevant.
Yeah. And so in the 0.0001 chance that your actions do matter, then like it's still worth it, because that's the only scenario that will matter. Nothing else matters. But
yeah, even if
I think there's an inherent human laziness that some people just have. Maybe it's genetic, where they're like, I'm willing to take those risks, and like I would rather just not think about it and rather not try, and it probably won't matter anyway. So
okay, yeah. So I'll word this scenario differently.
Okay,
you're in one of these 3 colored trains, right? And you're masturbating with great pornography in front of you, and you
you're just tired.
But there's only a 0.0001% chance you're in the yellow train.
Yeah.
So the button's probably not going to matter.
Yeah.
Do you press the button? I would say yes, I have a moral mandate to press the button. But a lot of people might say, well, if it's a small chance, I prefer masturbating. I just don't care.
It's like, or just like, I mean, is it going to matter? Like,
no,
do
but
I have to get up?
Here's the problem. Even if it's an astronomically small probability, like a 0.00000000.
Most people don't think like you do. I genuinely think most people don't think like that. And they're just like, well, I guess I'm gonna crash. And
Oh,
that's
but
just kind
hold
of
on,
it.
it doesn't matter. Okay, so sorry, you just have to think through this
Yeah,
logically.
but you're not thinking through the problem is you are only thinking in logical terms. And my
No,
argument is,
but this is the problem. They, as the atheists now, are actively choosing to think illogically.
so that's my point.
But then they might as well be a religious person.
No,
They're
because
exhibiting all the
Malcolm, a lot of people choose to become atheists because it's the laziest choice, not because they actually believe in atheism or they
I
believe in God.
strongly
They,
disagree. I
mm,
strongly disagree with this.
there are a lot of people who turn to atheism because they care about facts and they see that it's not standing up, that their religion is not standing up in the face of rigorous logical scrutiny. However, there's a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I'm an atheist, because they discovered that maybe they don't have to go to church on Sunday anymore and they can drink, and isn't that great? And then they're just an atheist.
I think almost nobody does that.
Mm.
No,
Another
when
place where I would turn to
this
those
is what people
commenting
do when they
and
want to change the
say,
rules of their
weigh
religion.
in, share your vote, watchers /
No,
listeners.
hold on. I will tell you what happens to the crowd that you're talking about. The
Mhm.
crowd that wants to say, "Oh, my religion has rules against drinking and gay sex and stuff like that." Well, just fuck those rules in particular. Like,
Mhm.
I'm still, but like those rules don't apply.
Mm.
The rules against drinking, nonsense. The rules against nonsense. It's the
Yeah, but
individual.
sometimes people choose to call themselves atheist in those scenarios instead of just like agnostic or whatever, because they feel like it makes them more edgy or it has some cachet. And again, it's not based on logic, it's just based on social signaling and laziness.
It's people who are religious and don't like the rules of the religion
Uh-huh.
do not leave the religion. They just change the rules. If you look at a progressive church where you see the trans pastor with all of the body piercings and all, I was telling Simone today, these people who like attempt to LARP these older religions, that just trying to copy the way things were done like a long time ago. I point out, I go, well, you can look at the statistics. The people who do this, they are deconverting at like record rates. Their kids are deconverting at record rates. The religions themselves are some of the most woke, like the Lutheran pastor I'll play here, the woke things you could imagine.
Let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God, whose pronouns are plural. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child, who wore a fabulous tunic and had 2 dads, and saw everyone as a sibling child of God. I believe in the rainbow spirit, who shatters our image of one white light and refracts it into a rainbow of gorgeous diversity. I believe in the Church of Everyday Saints, as numerous, creative, and resilient as patches on the AIDS quilt, whose feet are grounded in mud and whose eyes gaze at the stars in wonder.
This whole time, the call was coming from inside the house.
Like, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's all true. But the only people who are struggling or suffering are the ones that have left the strict path that the religion sets out. And I'm like, yeah, but that's people's kids. That's like saying the only people who died in this war are the ones who were shot. It's like, yeah, that's what it looks like when the system fails, when you die. That's what we're warning you against. If you do this, your kids will hate you and they'll castrate themselves and you will fail, because that's what the statistics show happening. And we're trying to help you here. But okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing you can do. When someone's stuck in their ways, they're stuck in their ways. They're just like, I have, and we're not saying we have the right answer, but we're like, let's actually try for something that potentially could be the right answer. Something that we know doesn't definitely not work. One of our followers recently on Discord was saying, well, I can't believe any of these weird things that Malcolm and Simone believe about God because I'm a Catholic. And I would point out that while we were not familiar with his work when we came up with these ideas, our work is very, very similar to the work of the Catholic priest Pierre Teilhard Chardin, who in the early 1900s proposed the concept of the omega point, which he described as the ultimate stage of human evolution, where humanity and the universe converge with the divine. He saw technological and scientific advancements as part of this evolutionary process, contributing to humanity's spiritual development and eventual union with God. So, I mean, clearly, not only can Catholics think this, but Catholic priests can think this sort of stuff, and Catholic priests can think this sort of stuff from over 100 years ago. And here I'd also note another thing that the same person was talking about is saying, well, I believe in a perfect God, and a perfect God is not a God who can improve. It's a stagnant God. And to me, something that is stagnant can't be perfect. If a thing lacks the capacity to improve, that is something that it lacks, which definitionally makes it not perfect. And then somebody said, well, how could something be perfect and in a state of improvement? And you would say, well, that thing would have to exist outside of time and through time. Oh, like the way we see God.
Malcolm, you didn't grow up where I grew up, where it is lower effort and easier to say that you're not Christian and that you're atheist. So if I, for example, grew up in the Bay Area in a religious family.
Location. Where you grew up is the ultra heart of the rot. It's the Bay Area.
Yeah, the rot has spread extremely far. And most schools, I would say, are largely atheist.
And the churches don't dissolve; they just give up on all their rules.
We'll just let the commenters say what they think. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll have the commenters say what they think.
I'm used to being wrong. I'm normally wrong. I'm probably wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. And we were just a very thoughtful listener had just written to us a long email about how one of our blind spots is that we, and by we, I think primarily you, but maybe me a little bit, think too logically and don't realize the extent to which the world acts on vibes and sentiment and instincts that are not necessarily logical or thought through.
Well, and we will eventually, that portion of the population.
Right, but that doesn't change what our reality is now, Malcolm.
What I meant to say is we will opt out of a version of humanity that includes that portion of the population. What?
You're so amused with yourself. I have to make dinner. I think I'm going to make cornbread muffins because they'll probably go best with the slurry in its fresh state. What do you think? And then I'll make this mashed potatoes.
You made
tomorrow.
Rice today.
I did, but if you don't like the rice, then you have cornmeal muffins.
Okay, well, I'm interested to try the rice.
Okay. I just figure like maybe the rice and the meat slurry is too matchy. You know what I mean? Like
it's too matchy.
Yeah, that you can't escape the flavor, and it has a kick. So you probably want something a little like you need a refuge. You need a carb to sink your teeth into.
Okay, I'll do some cornmeal muffins.
Okay, we're on. If I have the ingredients, we'll find out. I'm gonna go down and whip something up, and I love you.
I love you to death. By the way, how is this camera coming through? It looks really good on my end.
Yours looks great. Yeah, and then the problem with this camera that I have is that the lights get flashy.
Well, I'm getting another one of these cameras for you and to make sure you install the drivers. So why don't you install the drivers to test it tomorrow?
Okay. Not tomorrow because we have the kids for the next 4 days.
The Black Friday sales are going to end. I'm not.
Oh, okay. Then leave it in my room. Leave it on the plastic chair in my room. Yeah.
Will do. Love you.
I love you, Malcolm. You're beautiful. Also, you're pretty. Yeah. Oh my God, that smile. Yeah, the lighting you right now. This is like maybe having your room dark like this is the way to go too, because the lighting right now with you just look. The shadows let me see every chiseled curve that I love so much.
Oh. So many people hate what I look like, and I don't understand why. Like, I look at my face. Not only do I like my face, but I think like worst case scenario, I think I look very average.
I was just, a YouTuber was talking about this. There's this like issue with Ariana Grande, who's starring in the Wicked movie with someone else, like cheated on, I think she was married. But she also like had an affair with a married man who just had a newborn, and the married man like played SpongeBob SquarePants on Broadway, and he's not like traditionally masculine. Like he doesn't look like Chris Williamson, like we were talking about this morning, right? And this woman was like, listen, like guys don't realize how much this like creative, expressive, like not beefcake man, like how much action they get. And here's this example of like another very high value female, Ariana Grande, like house, like at great personal reputational risk, having an affair with this guy, like breaking a family.
I think that people misunderstand the types of people but that's not the point I'm making. I'm not talking about like general attraction.
Uh-huh.
I'm talking about an aversion. There is a
Oh.
category of people who like have to
Find you.
power through watching us because they find us so distasteful
Well, they
looking.
can just listen to us. Oh, but then they find our voices
They
so
find our
grating.
voices distasteful. I don't know what it is. Like, something
We need
about
to maybe
No,
we
and
can create
here's
like a
the thing,
VTuber alt channel where we both have just anime avatars and voice changers. So we both
some
just
of these
sound
people are like people who they'll love Chris Williamson and they'll
Mhm.
love like Edward Dunn. And I'm like, okay.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
Where am I failing here, right? Like, I can understand if you love Chris Williamson and I'm not beefcake enough, or I can understand if you love Edward Dutton and I'm not like weird nerd enough. I can't understand you loving both of them and hating that, like liking my ideas, but like hating my vibe.
Maybe someone can explain this to us.
Yeah,
in
maybe
great
somebody
detail.
can explain this.
Email us at partners.
Don't email us. Put it in the comments. I'm gonna go through
Okay,
the comments.
fine.
I'll make you
All
go through
right.
the comments on this. I wonder you're gonna do this, Simone. And I love you to death.
I love you too. Okay, bye. Blocked and Reported did a podcast episode on, which I haven't finished listening to, but they did it on the concept of gentle parenting, where parents are like, no, Jimmy, we look at sticks. We don't hit people with sticks. And then they like talk to their children and it's backfiring because what typically happens with gentle parenting is when a child misbehaves, the parent then sits down and talks with them about why their actions were suboptimal. And what are they doing? They're giving their kid tons of one-on-one attention whenever the kid acts up. So what does the kid do? They act up because guess what? All you have to do is break something or hurt
Oh
someone.
my God, those moms who yelled at me said that's what I was supposed to do when the kid was acting up. They're like, you need to just sit down and
you
explain
need to
him
reward them with attention and make them want to do it again because that's
No,
going to
I
solve
let
everything.
Toasty know you fucked up. I do brutal parenting.
Well, no. The thing is, like, the concept of gentle parenting, like, in principle, I don't disagree with it because the concept is, well, you know, instead of like introducing stupid, lame, arbitrary punishments, often delayed, that are divorced from the action, let the child learn through reality what happens. Of course, that's too dangerous if like what the kid's doing, as they were saying in Blocked and Reported, is like wandering into a stranger's van and disappearing because there's like, oh, you know, there's only one way that's going to end. Then there's not going to be a second chance. But I think that what real gentle parenting then is like, well, if you act like an asshole, we're not going to like you and we're not going to give you things that you want. Like that's.
I wish in a Redicon you had gone much stronger with this and pushed back when people said that other stuff. You know, you should have just been like, no, you're going to raise weak children who are going to suffer.
I know. I wanted to be polite about the time constraint, and you are correct that I should have just ignored it and
just ignore it. Time constraints don't matter. You push back. You make everyone else quake in your confidence in what an awesome parent you are.
Yeah. I struggle. It's hard because when I'm in public, I'm so disassociated already. I'm like dead. There's nothing behind. Like I'm just 100% on autocomplete. And like I'm trying, my algorithm is to optimize around. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm shifting my algorithm to being like honest about our views and about just being really clear about what we believe in and what our values are and causes are. But the base algorithm that I've lived with for the first at least like 35 years of my life has been minimize conflict and please people and follow the rules. And so like it's a big code base, Malcolm. It's like what is it? That company had like, they named their code base, I think it was Square, they named it the Beast, and it had like one full-time employee whose like only job was to manage it because it was just, there was so much code from like the original.
What does this have to do with it? I don't understand the point you're making.
That my algorithm has a lot of baggage and you can't just like shift it all of a sudden and then like it's fine.
Of course.
And
yeah. So you need new code base. You're the boss.
I know. Well, I'm just saying it takes a while to shift it. It takes a while.
All right.
Let's do it.
Want me to take a video?
Yeah.
All right. What are you doing?
I'm doing this.
Okay. Is this entertaining or something?
I think this way to get this box.
Titan, what is that thing that you have there?
What's this, Daddy? Daddy want to watch this.
Okay.
Daddy watch this.
You want to see what's on the video?
I just kicked
Look, it's
that.
Octavian. Torsten, what are you up to?
What's this, Dad?
Torsten, where are you going?
What's this?